in 2012, when the Fed started to taper, there was the taper tantrum. And in 2018, there was another tantrum with respect to the autopilot that was announced, a program of slowing the buying of securities. How and when do you see the Fed getting the balance sheet back to some sense of normal, by which I mean neither stimulative nor restrictive policy?
Okay, so Alex, I would say it's really premature to even think about normalizing to think about the size of the balance sheet and things like that. We're focused for now on achieving the goals that Congress has given us: maximum employment and price stability. And we'll start to think about when it's time to slow down our asset purchases, which would slow the growth of the balance sheet, and take further steps going forward. We'll start to think about that when there's been a whole lot more progress toward those goals. But I would say, based on our experience, some of which you mentioned, we do know the steps to take, and we know that we need to carefully communicate those steps well in advance. And what we wound up doing after the global financial crisis was, in 2013, we announced that we would gradually taper our asset purchases, so they ended about a year later. So gradual move, and then the size of the balance sheet was held constant for several years. And as the economy grows, then the ratio of the Fed's balance sheet to the size of the economy shrinks. So that's one thing we can do. I would also say, though, in terms of, I won't go into all the detail, but what really sets the size of the Fed's balance sheet in the longer run is the public's demand for our liabilities. And this probably isn't widely understood, but what the Fed is like a bank in the sense that we have assets and liabilities. We're like a small bank, except we're not small, but our balance sheet is actually less complicated than a commercial bank's is. And so we have our principal liabilities that make up for most of our liabilities are currency. And everyone knows what currency is, and the public demands that. Of course, currency is an asset in the hands of the public, and also bank reserves, which is just commercial bank deposits at reserve banks. So, and those are assets to the commercial banks, but to us, they're liabilities that we issue. So ultimately, a lot of the growth in the balance sheet after the global financial crisis was because of increasing demand from the public for currency, and even more than that, increasing demand from the banks for bank reserves. And the reason there was so much demand for bank reserves was that banks were required to hold very much higher quantities of highly liquid assets. And one of the most favored kinds of highly liquid asset, all of the assets that we create are effectively risk-free. So they're very popular for banks. That's where a lot of the growth of the balance sheet came in. But ultimately, that's a question we will return to, and we'll use, we have a playbook, and we'll no doubt we'll improve upon it. But we know, I think, how to normalize policy over time. And one key is telegraphing everything you're going to do well in advance to avoid surprises, and then moving very slowly.